Hello and welcome back to this damn idealistic crusade. This video is my best and worst of the year of 2021 for Blu-ray and 4K, broken down by labels and with some special awards. I like trying to put these lists together, but of course it's very difficult seeing as I am not reviewing every single release of the year, and I'm only able to review what I've actually been able to purchase and afford, so I don't get free review screeners or anything. So unfortunately, I'm a bit more limited in what I can review because, again, I'm just going off the titles that I've actually purchased myself as a consumer. But I do try to give every title its due diligence, and I feel there are some titles that have gotten severely overlooked this year that have really fantastic supplemental features, really brilliant transfers, and really great audio presentations as well. So I wanted to put this together and try to do my own particular best and worst recommended titles for the previous year of 2021. I wanted to put this together and get it out a little bit earlier, but certain things like replacement discs and trying to get in some discs from the end of December, because a lot of discs came out at the very tail end of the year, meant that I had to wait a little bit longer. Plus, I try to go through in as much detail as possible with these, so I don't just hand out awards or recommendations willy-nilly. I try to make sure to give the best possible recommendation so you stretch your dollar as much as it possibly can go, since we are confronted with such a wealth of releases these days. Again, my own personal preferences for catalog titles and classic era films, so I'm not going to be including a lot of modern releases in this particular year roundup because there are simply so many great catalog releases to go over, and again, that's where my forte really is. So if that's not what you're looking for, that's totally understandable. Again, this is my own personal opinion, but I tried to make it as informed as possible. So hopefully you can get what you need out of this video, and hopefully this might point you towards some titles you had maybe thought about or maybe had not even been on your radar. Again, it is limited to the titles that I've been able to specifically purchase and review myself, so this is by no means all-encompassing. But with all that said, I'd like to introduce the contestants, and this will be broken up by individual label and distributor, almost as if this was a best in show contest, going through the entrance for each label and then whittling it down and then giving out some particular special awards. All right, we'll start going alphabetically with Arrow Films. I have two of their limited edition packages in my best of list for this year. The first is their beautiful limited edition release of the Butcher 1965 Sam Peckinpah directed masterpiece Major Dundee, with a wealth of extras, including both the extended and theatrical release versions. Second is their beautiful limited release with a new scan of the Ridley Scott film Legend. This includes both the original theatrical release and the director's cuts, plus a mixture of new and old extras. This was released also with a theatrical art version. Unfortunately, they were not able to do a 4K version, so it is 1080p only. For Criterion, I have a number of entrants. First would be Spine 435, which was their full release of the Anthony Mann classic western The Furies, complete with replicating the original book as they had done for the DVD release. Next is Spine 1078, which was their release of the new 4K restoration of the classic noir Nightmare Alley, with this beautiful cover art. Next is Spine 1085, which was their release of the 4K restoration of the cinematic treasure Bringing Up Baby, followed by Spine 1099, which is their release of both the new 4K restoration of High Sierra, packaged along with the 1949 Raoul Walsh directed Western remake Colorado Territory, plus the feature-length documentary on Walsh, making this essentially 3 features in one release. And Spine 1100, their release of the new 4K restoration of the science fiction classic landmark The Incredible Shrinking Man, with a phenomenal extras package. And of course, at Spine 1104, one of their initial titles entering into the 4K UHD realm, of course, I had to have the Citizen Kane release. Sadly, I only have one title for the Eureka label. This year I have not imported as many titles as I would like to. not only because of cost, but also due to the pandemic, really limiting a lot of international shipping options. Although it's still pretty easy to order directly from their website, I will admit that I have not gotten as many titles as I would simply like to. Eureka has done a number of great releases this year, but I had to have this one in there, which was a beautiful surprise this year. That is their limited edition release of the Karloff at Columbia set. These are all of the films Karloff made in the horror genre at Columbia, primarily featuring the what are called the Mad Doctor films, all of which that I really adore. They're very underrated, and at least 2 or 3 of them are absolute classics. Plus, it has a beautiful extras package. Next up for the Indicator label, I have 2 standalone releases and then 2 box sets to mention. So first is Spine 207 from Indicator, which is their release of the classic Howard Hawks film The Criminal Code, which was a early breakout role for Boris Karloff. And of course, they also did Spine 208 from a brand new 4K restoration, the beautiful, iconic, foundational film for screwball comedies, again from Howard Hawks' 20th Century. And then for the 2 box sets for 2021, I had to mention the beautiful Columbia Noir Volume 2. This is the second of 4 volumes that Indicator's now done of classic Columbia film noir titles with this beautiful packaging. Then continuing with their iconic Hammer volume releases of Hammer horror films and other films of Hammer. Hammer Volume 6, Night Shadows. Then for Kino Lorber, I have a couple discs that I felt were rather exemplary for this year. And it's hard to narrow down the list of Kino titles because they release such a vast amount of titles per year, and it's a mixture of old and new masters and restorations and really ancient masters. But I had to spotlight their beautiful release of the Universal 4K restoration of the 1923 version of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. This is a beautiful disc and probably the silent film Blu-ray of the year. Of course, the most talked about Kino release of the year, and also the most important from the standpoint of updating a film that has had transfer and video issues for its entire life on home video. I have to also include and talk about the Kino Lorber release of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly on the 4K edition, and the attempts they made at fixing the horrible color grading of the awful 4K master, trying to fix as many things as possible, plus including the Laserdisc mono, which is still the best sounding source of the film's original mono mix anywhere in the world, and also for the first time on video, 100% recreating the original 161 release version seen around the world in 1966, 1967. And then this one just slipped in. It came out at the very end of the year, but it is a beautiful improvement over a very mediocre older master. Also another classic Western that doesn't get talked about enough. That is the Kino Lorber reissue of the classic Robert Aldrich Western, Veracruz, here in their new Blu-ray edition. And then lastly, for boutique labels, I have a mountain of releases from Warner Archive. It's no secret that Warner Archive is my favorite American label, and no, I'm not shilling for them, but of course they just do so many quality releases of great titles. And 2021 was at first seemingly a rather dicey year, seeing as there was a shakeup at Warner Brothers, the parent company, and George Feltenstein was let go, but then eventually was brought back at the end of the year, and the release slate kind of cut off towards the beginning of the year, and then it just went like the floodgates had opened. And 2022 seems to be a very promising year that they've gotten off to a great start. But just to show you the titles that I'm going to include for competition in this video, got a whole stack here of just Warner Archive discs, so to run through them very quickly. They've, of course, been working through the classic Thin Man series, doing one film at a time in beautiful Blu-ray restorations. 2021 saw 3 films, leaving only 1 to be done in 2022, and that will complete the 6-film series on Blu-ray. So that, of course, included Another Thin Man, Shadow of the Thin Man, the great underrated gem, The Thin Man Goes Home. So these 2 are both Val Lewton films from the classic horror films made at RKO. First is Isle of the Dead, and then the Archive did a double feature release of 2 more, so bringing out The Ghost Ship with the final film Bedlam. The archive also did one of the greatest horror films of all time, one of the great Golden Age horror films, and an absolute masterpiece with a beautiful new transfer that actually restores the long thought lost original spoken prologue of the film. Plus, it carries over the great Steve Haberman DVD commentary track. That is Mad Love. And then going through the rest of the titles alphabetically, perhaps the surprise announcement of the year, because this film had such rights issues that it seemed rather improbable it would ever see a Blu-ray release. And one of the iconic Warner Brothers films, without question, as of course the Michael Curtiz directed masterpiece from 1938, Angels with Dirty Faces. They also reached into the vault of lesser regarded and harder to see Bogart titles, so they did Chain Lightning, the rather underrated sequel in name only, is sort of a reimagining of the classic Village of the Damned, the underrated Children of the Damned, the first of the two-color Technicolor pre-code horror films, the sister feature to their previously released and one of my Blu-rays of the year, Mystery of the Wax Museum, the, again, Michael Curtiz directed Dr. X from a full-blown restoration. Then next is a film that gets usually looped in with the rest of the classic Warner Brothers gangster films, but a film that is from the great Golden Age year of 1939, one of the great films of that year, and for my money, this is probably the best prison film ever made, the archive release of Each Dawn I Die. The archive also released a beautiful new transfer of Fritz Lang's first American film, the 1936 blistering masterpiece, Fury. Another of the archive's December releases, one of their final discs of the year, a beautiful new transfer of one of the most exquisitely beautiful Technicolor films ever made, the British 1952 epic version of Ivanhoe. Also in 2021, the archive did a beautiful, gorgeous, long overdue new transfer for one of the greatest westerns ever made, the third of the 5 Anthony Mann James Stewart westerns, The Naked Spur. Also long overdue for Blu-ray, a title that is a genuine masterpiece, hugely influential in many different ways, and yet criminally underrated. The archive has released the Sidney Lumet directed masterpiece, Prince of the City. The archive has released a number of Errol Flynn classic vehicles, and this one in particular has been in real need of rescuing since the DVD suffered terribly from Technicolor registration issues. Those have been beautifully corrected for this new Blu-ray release. Of course, I had to have and include The Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex, the classic custom film directed by Michael Curtiz. And then lastly, this is perhaps the most surprising disc of the year from anyone, seeing as this film has been stuck in and out of public domain hell in terms of releases and its rights history. So it had gotten a random Blu-ray in Germany, which quickly went out of print, so I was never able to get it. And then the archive just suddenly did a mic drop announcement and released the lone film of the Errol Flynn, Olivia de Havilland starring vehicles together that had never gotten an official release here in the U.S. outside of one Laserdisc release double feature, and that is Santa Fe Trail. So that introduces all of the contestants for the various category and awards that I have to give out. Again, this is just me giving out particular awards, so it's not like it's anything that anybody's been clamoring to win, but I hope that maybe somebody will get something out of this, because again, I have put way too much thought, admittedly, into these. But before I get into those, I think each of these discs and box sets is well worth your hard-earned money for different reasons. Some have better overall packages than others. Some are like archive titles, maybe lighter on the extras or just feature only, but at much more attractive price points with beautiful restorations. So it balances out. But before I go into the best awards, I wanted to give a couple mentions of titles that I feel are really problematic and do the worst of 2021 section. So in case you thought everything was sunshine and roses, unfortunately it isn't. I think there are a couple titles that I should mention that are very important, and ones that I think there are several that I think should be avoided and should have been recalled or not released at all. And that's not meaning titles that have had technical flaws and disc replacement programs, because that stuff happens and it's understandable. There have been some very high profile ones this year, most notably the Criterion Citizen Kane Blu-ray release having a defective feature transfer in terms of the SDR conversion. But Criterion has actually corrected that and has done a replacement program and was pretty quick to respond. I'm actually still waiting on my replacement disc, but at least they put all that together, so I don't fault them for that. And Kino has had to do several replacement programs. So, for example, their Hard Target 4K release had some definite audio errors on both the 5.1 and 2.0 mixes. So they are, at least as far as I'm aware, correcting the 5.1 problems. So at least they've got some sort of replacement program for that. So I'm not counting titles like that where there have been problems that have been identified and are actually being addressed. This will be specifically some titles that have definite issues, and issues that are either being ignored or not being corrected, and some discs that, again, should have never been released. So I guess if we're going to do a roll call of some of the most notorious releases of the year and titles that are very problematic, just to run through some of these very quickly. And these are just titles that I wanted to mention. First would be the Wong Kar-wai Criterion box set. That is a box set full of revisionism. All the transfers of the films have been purposely changed by Wong Kar-wai and others to not reflect their original presentation. So that is more of an artistic question of presentation. It is not, unfortunately, an archival-minded release in terms of presenting the films the way they were originally done. So it's not really a technical criticism, it's a criticism from an archival standpoint and an artistic standpoint. But it is, I think, a notable title to mention, because there's been a great deal of discussion about that this past year. Unfortunately, Mill Creek as a label has done a number of questionable releases. They've been doing a lot of repackagings of older releases and a lot of using older masters. And in particular, they had their I Dream of Jeannie set just come out recently, which is a mixture of older masters and is just not a very good Blu-ray presentation. But that brings me to a very botched 4K release. That would be the Kino Lorber release of the classic The Silence of the Lambs, which was supposed to replace the lovely Criterion Blu-ray, which does have the original Dolby Stereo mix, and it sounds beautiful. It's one of the handful of Criterion releases with great sounding audio that is not supplanted by a prior or Laserdisc release. So it does advance in some areas in terms of picture quality over the Criterion, since it is a 4K transfer, but unfortunately it was mastered in the wrong color space for the significant part of the opening of the film. I think it's about the first couple reels or so anywhere between 20 and 40 minutes. I'm not sure the exact amount of the runtime where the color space is incorrect, but that causes color and transfer problems. And on top of that, the 2.0 option listed on the disc is actually a down mix of the 5.1 up mix that MGM did back in the DVD era. So it is deficient in both picture and sound, and it was decided by Kino that they would not do a correction or a disc recall program. So that makes that disc completely pointless as far as I'm concerned, and I think you are much better off either sticking with or getting the Criterion Blu-ray while it's still in print. Plus, the Criterion does have exclusive extras that were not on the Kino release, which was primarily porting over some of the old MGM Legacy extras, so you're going to have to keep your Criterion version anyway for the Criterion extras. Lack of original audio seems to be a going thing for most catalog releases from major studio labels, really ever since the DVD heyday. So while that's nothing new to us cinephiles, unfortunately, it seems most major labels have a real hatred for providing high-quality original audio, which is just inexplicable and makes zero sense. It is something that continues to affect new releases. That happened on the Mad Max Anthology 4K release. But thankfully that does have a recall program going on, and they stopped selling copies because it didn't include the advertised original audio, at least for the Road Warrior and Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. So I'm not exactly sure if people have started to get their replacement copies, or if the included new original audio track on these new press discs will be worth the time. It will probably be a lossy track, knowing Warner Brothers, and will probably not sound anywhere near as good as the best sounding versions that I'm personally aware of, which are still the letterboxed Warner Brothers Laserdiscs from the early 1990s for both films. But at least that does have a replacement program going on. It just remains to be seen if that's going to be effective or not. That brings me on to what I think is the worst 4K release of the year. And for reasons that a lot of reviews did not go into, and it's also quite deceptive, which is very infuriating. And that would be the Indiana Jones Complete Adventures 4K release. The reason why I think this is the worst 4K release of the year is that it is, again, as with the Wong Kar-wai box set presentation, but not as obvious. It is a revisionist presentation of the original 3 films. Not only are there still some color timing issues with Raiders of the Lost Ark, it does look better than the absolutely putrid Blu-ray release that I still think is one of the worst Blu-rays ever made. It does improve things on both Temple of Doom and Last Crusade. However, the real problem with the release, aside from subpar packaging and a higher price tag, and not including the new masters on Blu-ray, just including another Blu-ray copy of the previously released disc. The problem is the revisionism that was done to these transfers. So while they are improvements over the Blu-rays in most respects, they do not feature any form of the original audio. The audio presentations are all brand new remixes, and these films having iconic, groundbreaking soundtracks for their era for each of the original 3 films, that is downright criminal. They have not had their complete original audio or something resembling it really for some time, at least the DVDs and the Blu-rays for each. The DVDs were fine for all 3, and the Blu-rays were fine for Temple and Crusade, but you can't even say that anymore. But while I knew that was coming when the specs were announced, and I was already prepared for that, what I was not was the work and tweaks done to all of the effects works in the film. And that means on almost every single effects shot, there have been tweaks and redos to the actual compositing of the effects work. So everything has been digitally tweaked or touched up or changed in some way or fashion, which is really completely against the spirit of the Indiana Jones films, which are made and designed to exactly mimic the 1930s cliffhanger serials, which always did have some rough effects work that was very two-fisted and as best as they could do on low budget and short time schedules. In fact, Raiders was specifically made as a film to be shot fast and dirty, exactly as if it was a 1930s Republic serial. So they have tweaked the films over the years. Raiders has had some tweaks in it, and the last untouched release that you can see in widescreen is actually the old 1991 Laserdisc that has things like the reflection of the Cobra and the plexiglass in front of Harrison Ford's face in the Well of the Souls. That has been digitally removed for decades now. But the revisionism to all the effects shots I felt was just so heavy-handed and so completely against the spirit and the identity of these films, in addition to Raiders still having some color issues and there being some color issues in Temple and Crusade, and none of them having their original audio track. I feel it is a complete waste of your money. I think it's an insult to the fans of the series, and I think it's an insult to the series' integrity and why these films were made in the first place. So I think it is a gross example of what revisionism can do, and it's a very sneaky, deceptive one. It's not going to be something that people are going to notice unless you're a diehard fan, and you might notice one or two things here and there, but until you take the time to actually pause and freeze frame and step through the sequences, you won't notice these differences, and they are very obvious when you stack them up against, say, the Blu-rays or the DVDs to see the difference between an older video transfer of the untouched effects work and then the new tweaked, recomposited, digitally improved version. So that's why it is, I think, a completely unacceptable release and the worst 4K release of 2021 to be completely avoided. And continuing on that front, what I think is the worst Blu-ray release of 2021 takes all of that revisionism to a ridiculous degree. I think the worst Blu-ray of 2021 is the Disney Vault Collection release, which is for their specific movies subscription service that you have to subscribe and actually purchase X number of titles per month to even access these titles. But they released the animated classic Make Mine Music, and it is, unfortunately, despite what the packaging and the original specs claim as it being uncut and it carrying the disclaimer that it might, it was animation from another time and intended for adult collectors, which is what most studios will do these days, and it's understandable. It is actually a censored version of the film, missing one of the 10 shorts contained within, so it is an incomplete version of the film. It's also an older transfer loaded with DNR and remixed audio that is actually presented with a lossy audio track. So it is a single layer, overpriced, exclusive Blu-ray that does not have a good transfer and is censored only because the company decided to do so, or that they were just too lazy to make a new transfer, which I'm also betting is probably part of the reason, and simply used a pre-existing edited censored version of the film. So it is a completely just abominable Blu-ray release. It is not worth your time or money, and the film still has censorship problems. When you look at the materials that are censored, it doesn't even make sense very much why they were deemed that objectionable in that short that was removed. So I don't understand it at all. I don't subscribe to the Disney Movie Club, although there are many titles I'm very interested in. There's never enough with particular quality to justify the high costs of entering said club. And seeing things like this happen does not make me want to ever join said club. So I think that is without question the worst Blu-ray release of 2021, a disc that should have never been released, particularly since it was advertised and promoted as being the uncut version of the film and marketed towards diehard Disney and animation historians and fans. And I have 2 awards for titles that I feel are great titles that are unfortunately marred by particular points. So the first, I would have to say, is the award for most disappointing transfer of the year, meaning the picture transfer that disappointed me the absolute most in 2021, and that would actually go to the Criterion Incredible Shrinking Man. This was a Universal Pictures 4K restoration, and this film should be grainy as heck, considering all of the massive usage of optical effects work throughout the entirety of the film. But it seems like it was most certainly grain managed to a ridiculous degree. It has an almost impression of DNR all over the place, particularly in the opening half of the film. It's still a great Blu-ray release. It has a phenomenal extras package, which is why I still have it in my best of the year contenders list. But it is that transfer that really holds it back. I don't know if it was Universal who did this or Criterion themselves, but it seems somehow, some way, somebody decided that it was just too grainy. So this 4K restoration winds up not looking much better than the old Arrow Blu-ray release, which is based off of the old Universal Video Master. So the fact that this is only barely better than the old Video Master from who knows when, at least probably the early 2000s, from the DVD era, it's a shame, and it's the reason why this is much lower on my list. So this was an extremely disappointing transfer on an otherwise really exceptional disc with a fantastic extras package. And of course, the Worst Packaging of the Year 2021 award has a very easy and obvious winner. That is, of course, the Criterion 4K release of Citizen Kane, which is one of the most appallingly packaged disc releases I have ever seen or experienced on any format. And I'm not talking about the cover art, which did stir up a lot of people. I've gotten used to that. No, I'm talking about the actual packaging itself. I've had this for a short while, and already it's got damage all over the slipcase, as you can see just from general wear. There's already a corner that's exposed, and there is little crinkling all over the place. But that would be fine if it weren't for just how horrible this packaging is and how just completely flimsy it feels. And again, you don't get the full sense of this until you actually have it and handle it in your hands yourself. Seeing pictures online does not convey just how completely slipshod the packaging is. So, of course, it is a slipcase, And it's also an oversized case, so the entirety of the package when you get it is already slanted at an angle, which makes it even harder to get this slipcase on and off. You very much will wind up bumping and tearing the corners of both the slipcase and the case inside, just trying to get the darn thing on and off. So of course, when you get it, it's very stylized, and that's fine. And you would think it's just a digipack foldout, but no, because this is a 4-disc affair, they decided to go with this literal cross-type opening and spread out the letters of Kane's name, which I get, and yeah, it looks impressive to a certain degree, but it's also unwieldy as hell. And that means you then have to open the top flap like this. I'm going to try and hold all this on camera and not drop everything. So again, the visual, I get it, but this is just terrible. And then when you fold down the bottom panel, I'm having to hold in the booklet, which is just flopping around in the center of the package, which means it's going to get dings. And when you pick up this package in the store, you're going to think that it's got floater discs inside. But no, that is indeed just the booklet, just literally flopping around, hitting the corners. So the booklet itself is bigger and thicker than most Criterion booklets, and it's a good book. It's not really a booklet, it's an actual bound book, but you know, it shouldn't be just flopping around inside there. And so then when you hold the set like this, and again, just trying to hold this on camera is pretty much impossible, it looks like this. As you can see very clearly, the discs are removed from the interior of the flap, not the exterior. So this takes the problem of the silly cardboard flap type sleeve design and magnifies it. So it's not so bad getting the discs out of the top and bottom flap, but for the interior flaps, it is pretty much impossible to get the discs out without removing the booklet first. That means opening the entire case, taking the booklet out, and then you have to literally use your fingers and pry the disc out, so you're going to get scratches and smudges all over the disc, whatever you do, and they're very much jammed in there. I really despise the cardboard type page flap book design that they insist on using in Blu-ray and 4K cases, but I never expected things like this to enter the boutique realm, and especially Criterion. They have been doing this since they started doing their big box sets like the Fellini and Bergman boxes, which really bring those sets down majorly from what they could be. It is horrible packaging, but this takes it to a whole other level. I think, yes, it looks interesting, and I get that they wanted to do something special for Kane, but this is one of the most appalling packages I have ever seen for any home video release, regardless of format. It is practically designed to infuriate and make it difficult to get discs in and out and not damage them. And it's also hard to tell which disc goes where. They did at least include a little label for the discs where they go, but you can't see that when the disc is in there for most of the time. It's a terrible idea all the way around. I really hope they never use this again, because again, this is appallingly bad. All I needed was a standard case. I don't need this type of fancy crap when it's going to be this infuriating, and you're going to wind up damaging something practically every time you pull this off the shelf. So I know a lot of people have complained about this, and I will be going into this again when I do my Kane review separately. I've just been waiting for my replacement disc to get here before I attempted a full review. But this is without question the worst packaging for 2021, and one of the worst disc packagings I have ever seen or experienced. It is infuriatingly bad. So with that out of the way, let's move on to my handful of awards for the best discs of the year. I tried to come up with a couple different categories to try and spotlight a lot of the different pluses and positives of a lot of these releases. So first, I would like to start with my award for the best restorations on disc for 2021. And there are two titles that the restoration process and work are really head and shoulders above all the others. They really stand out. And so I'm giving this award to two different titles. I'm giving it to the universal restoration of the silent classic Hunchback of Notre Dame and the majestic restoration of the two-colored Dr. X. These are restorations that have pulled limited elements to new heights. These films look brand new. Hunchback is still stuck using the same 16 millimeter sources, and they pulled out extra detail that I simply did not know was there. Whatever sorcery happened, I don't know, but it looks even better than the older Flicker Alley release, and again, it's still using the same 16 millimeter source. But even with that, the restoration on Dr. X is unbelievable. This looks and plays like a brand new film, just like the previous release from the Warner Archive of the Restoration and Mystery of the Wax Museum. And what makes this even more special is they also brought the rarely seen and not seen on home video pretty much ever, simultaneously shot black and white version of the film. So the film was shot twice in both 2-color Technicolor and secretly in black and white to make a cheaper black and white print version. And both have been restored and are included on this release. So I give the Best Restoration award to both discs, but I think the clear winner is the Dr. X restoration. Then my award for the best improvement over what we saw on DVD in terms of the picture quality and overall transfer improvement. I have a tie between two Warner Archive titles. First, I would like to say Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex for fixing the massive Technicolor registration issue problems of the DVD. It is a lightning leap forward, and the Archive has done a number of these releases so far, and a number in 2021, including some that I just haven't gotten to literally purchase yet because they've done so many. They also have done a Blu-ray of the Yearling and the classic National Velvet as well. But Elizabeth and Essex had really bad registration problems and tons of color fringing all over the DVD, which made it very difficult to watch. So for a number of years, I'd hoped they would revisit it and do the expensive process work to realign the Technicolor separation elements. They have done it for this release, and it is beautiful. But with that being said, I think the improvement on this title is even better, and that is The Naked Spur, which had a very soft, almost a slightly out of focus looking DVD. I have seen a print of this film, which is a very tough thing to do, and it looked the same, so I didn't know if it was the same element they used for the DVD, but the Archive did a new transfer for this release, and a lot of that was addressed. So just like Elizabeth and Essex, the DVD was a little hard to watch because of that, but this is a real jump forward, and you can pretty much just totally get rid of the DVD now, because this is the way you want to see this immortal Western. Then the award for largest improvement on previously flawed releases, of course, goes to the Kino 4K release of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. This taking the awful Retrovada color-graded 4K master with completely hideous improper color timing, and doing its best to correct that, and also fixing the mistakes of their previous 2017 Blu-ray, which really caused more problems than already existed previously. And on top of that, actually working with the fan community for the first time and listening to everybody's concerns and research, and actually conforming the edit properly 100% to the original 1967 161 international release version of the film, and also using elements of fan-supplied original IB dye transfer Technicolor prints to supply the missing frames necessary to fully recreate the 1967 proper release version. And on top of that, they also used the fan-supplied Laserdisc mono mix from the original MGM UA Letterbox US Laserdisc release, which is still the best-sounding presentation of the mono mix that is known to exist anywhere in the world. And so that was synchronized and also supplied with fans. So this time, instead of ignoring and belittling the fan archivists of Leone's work, who do just absolutely beyond incredible work, they worked with them this time and actually listened to the fans and produced a release that is really the best you can do currently with this master without starting from scratch and having to spend a lot of money to do a brand new master. So this has the best presentation of the film to date. It's not perfect because you do see some of that terrible color creeping in here and there. They couldn't completely get rid of it. It's still the same screwed up source master, but the presentation is unbelievably better. So now there is a version I can recommend that is not a Laserdisc of the film, and it has the Laserdisc mono, which is the best audio for the film that exists, period. This is on both the 4K release and the Blu-ray. It does not include any version of the extended MGM 3-hour cut, which is not exactly what Leone intended anyway from 2003, but it does include those Italian scenes that were in that version and in most of the Italian release versions in 1966 on the 4K disc as a bonus extra. So those are still included but not incorporated into the film. It also includes a 5.1 upmix of the Laserdisc mono if you really have to have 5.1 for this film, if you insist on 5.1 for everything, which you really shouldn't. But in case you do, that is an upmix of the proper mono, so you have that option as well. But this was a beautiful surprise. It's something I thought would never happen given what happened on the 2017 Blu-ray, and they are supposedly working on the other $2 films and hopefully similar editions that address and hopefully fix a lot of the errors that still exist on those two films. So for best audio quality, I have 4 titles to talk about. All 4 of these feature not just audio restorations, but also, as far as I'm aware, these are the best sounding audio presentations of these films that exist to date on home video. They are all massive improvements over previous DVD and Laserdisc editions, and I have done extensive comparisons across the board. And these 4, I think, have the most marked dramatic improvement, and thus they are my choices for Best Audio of 2021. The 4 titles are the incredible audio restoration done for Dr. X, which brings almost dialogue that was lost or inaudible before on the older releases to clarity that I never expected. The audio presentation on the new transfer of Mad Love is impeccable and has a better noise floor and finer detail than either the DVD or the Laserdisc. It is a night and day improvement. The same goes for the Criterion release of High Sierra. The audio here is far and away better than the previous DVD and Laserdisc editions, which sound extremely muffled in comparison. And I would also say the same for the Criterion release of Bringing Up Baby, which has, again, what I think is the best-sounding version of the film's original mono that has yet been released. It is a dramatic leap forward over the Laserdisc and the DVD edition. So for Best Picture Quality, my award goes to an actual list of titles. Again, there have been so many beautiful restorations this year that it's hard to pick just a single film, but I wanted to at least mention some with certain preference for others that were just hugely impressive. But it's also not quite a fair award given that a lot of films don't have original negatives or lower gen materials to work from. So while I think, for example, the 4K transfer of High Sierra is beautiful, it's not as spectacular as some of these titles here. So you do always have to keep that in mind. But I did want to spotlight at least some titles that I thought had just gorgeous presentations on disc in terms of the picture quality. So I have to start again with the absolutely incredible Dr. X transfer and restoration. This looks like a brand new film, and it being one of the two-color Technicolor horror films, it looks like no other film. It plays like no other film. You know it's Dr. X. It is a unique presentation, and it's spellbinding on this Blu-ray release. That also goes for the new transfer of the immortal Mad Love, one of the great horror films, directed by Carl Freund, also partially shot by Greg Toland. This is a beautiful Blu-ray, and it so abounds over the old editions that I've watched every year. I was just completely mesmerized. It is just astonishing to look at. The same goes for the 2 releases the archive has done of Val Lewton horror films. So that was, of course, first their release of Isle of the Dead, one of the most underrated of the cycle, the next to last. It's a beautiful picture transfer of a visually stunning film, as are all of the 9 Val Lewton horror films. But also their double feature release of The Ghost Ship and Bedlam, both of these films shot by the legendary cameraman Nicholas Musuraca. This is a gorgeous Blu-ray, especially the Ghost Ship with its usage of shadows and the lights coming through the portholes on the ship itself. Of course, the only problem is the automated dirt removal accidentally removed the moth from the opening of the ghost ship. It's a very small thing, but it is something that the archive is going to do a replacement program for at some point in this year of 2022. So that's the only reason that this is not absolutely perfect, but it's still a stunning experience to look at these two films visually now, which just completely destroy the old masters from Laserdisc and DVD. Of course, I have to mention the beautiful work done on The Naked Spur, which is already a gorgeously shot film, and like most of the Man Westerns, is primarily a film that was shot on location out in the wilderness. So the very beautiful Technicolor hues that were always there have really come through to the fore this time. That carries over into, again, what I think is one of the most beautiful Technicolor films you'll ever see, which is Ivanhoe. This was a great surprise that they were releasing this on Blu-ray. It doesn't have a huge reputation these days, but when you talk about classic color adventure films, Ivanhoe is right there at the top of the list. This is one of the great swashbucklers and one of the films you have to see for its photography alone, let alone the great score and the great pageantry going on. And the work done here visually is stunning. Again, I have to mention the re-registration of the Technicolor elements on Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex that really resurrect it from the very hard-to-watch old DVD. The archive also did a beautiful new transfer for Fury, which looks like a brand new film. It is a stunning looking disc that absolutely shows off the film to its best attributes. And again, have to mention the restoration on Hunchback of Notre Dame, which looks amazing and astounding, and I never thought it could look like this. I simply thought that it was just impossible to look this good. And then lastly, I would like to highlight what I think is the beautiful 4K restoration on 20th Century here on the Indicator release with a beautiful encoding job. Picture-wise, this is still one of the best Blu-rays of the year and a disc that is a must-own just for the picture transfer alone. 20th Century also takes my next award, which is for Best Art Design for a Standalone Release. Just take that in for a moment. This, of course, is the limited edition, which I believe has now sold out, so it will be replaced by the standard edition, which will keep the same art. But again, I mean, that is just worth thousands of words. The shot of Carole Lombard here on the cover, it is just unbelievably gorgeous. And of course, everything else is up to Indicator's usual high standards with the interior art, the reversible art sleeve, and the very thick booklet. I mean, these Indicator booklets are not booklets. They are legitimate books. Even though it's not hardbound like the Criterion Kane booklet, this is far more impressive and just loaded with stills and great essays, as is typical of every Indicator limited edition. But this is without question, I think, the best art, design, and packaging of 2021. Then my award for best direct upgrade from a previous DVD edition has to go to the Criterion release of The Furies. This updates their old DVD release, which I'd held off getting for a long time because I had hoped they would do a Blu-ray release, and that DVD had some issues because it was a picture box transfer, which is something Criterion was doing later in the DVD game for some time. That meant that the transfer literally has letterboxing on all four sides of the Academy ratio image, which meant that it did lose in picture resolution some. Of course, that release did come with the original book, which has been replicated here, and this Blu-ray release does add a few new extras, as well as having the lovely slipbox packaging, a full booklet, the disc contained separately, and also replicating the publication of the original novel as well, which is something I had hoped Criterion would keep. They're not always able to do that due to rights or simply not wanting to. And since this is a much more obscure Western title, it's not going to be their biggest seller. So I was very pleased that they retained the book as well. Then the award for the best and most comprehensive supplemental features section or extra section on disc, I have 6 finalists. So in 6th place, I have the beautiful Arrow release of Legend, containing the 2 cuts of the film in their deluxe packaging with the lovely booklet and fold-out poster. In 5th place, I have the nearly incredible release of Incredible Shrinking Man from Criterion, which has a enormous extras package that also includes a fantastic Tom Weaver audio commentary. This has so much information about the film, you're going to find yourself spending the next day just going through the extras after watching the film. So it is very stacked, even though it's still a single disc release. At number 4, I have the 4K release of Citizen Kane. While this is substantially loaded with extras, I do think some releases still outstrip it, and it does carry over the important extras from the previous Warner releases. It adds some great new extras of its own. We have multiple commentaries as well, and it does include a good portion of the old Criterion Laserdisc extras. However, those various interviews have sort of been edited together and split up into little compilation packages, which is unfortunate because I was hoping this would fully replicate everything, so that way everything on the old Criterion 1992 Special Edition Laserdisc would be carried over. So do keep in mind it is a slightly edited form of those extras. It doesn't include everything from the old Warner Brothers DVD and Blu-ray, but that Battle for Citizen Kane documentary those had was not the greatest, and the documentary included here I think is actually quite a bit better, which is the complete Citizen Kane BBC documentary from 1991. So I do think it's a really great extras package. It includes the necessary materials from the older Warner Brothers releases with some great new materials. However, once I watched through all of these, I was a bit miffed that it didn't have every last scrap from the Laserdisc release, and I still felt like it didn't completely go 100% with as much information as I would like to have. But then again, it's almost impossible to ever get enough information about Kane because it's one of those films that we all obsess over. And so when you go into these extras and you're a fan of the film already, you do know a great deal of this material already. So a lot of times you're being told things you've already read or you've known for years. So there's probably a degree of that too. But I still think it's a great extras package, and it is worth upgrading alone for the new extras. But that's why I don't have it in my number 1 spot. So number 3, it gets swayed a bit because of the additional features in terms of the actual additional feature films that are presented. So at number 3, I have the Criterion release of High Sierra, which not only has some great new extras, plus the old DVD extras, but it includes 2 additional feature films. One, the 1949 classic Western version, also directed by Raoul Walsh, Colorado Territory, which is a great film in its own right, and the feature documentary on Raoul Walsh himself, which is a fantastic watch. So here you're getting 3 feature films for the price of 1, and one of them being one of the great films of cinema history. It's a great package in terms of the extras, and again, you're getting 2 additional feature films in the release of High Sierra. At number 2 is the incredible Warner Archive release of Dr. X. This is at my number 2 because not only are you getting the restored version of the 2-color Technicolor version of the film, but also the alternate, hardly ever seen now black and white version, which was shot simultaneously, does have some different camera angles and little differences, and also some different shots mixed in. So it's a fascinating means to watch and study both films and see where they differ, and see if you prefer the black and white version to the 2-color version. Originally, the black and white version was what you would see most of the time decades ago, and then when the color version was rediscovered, the black and white version became the rare version and has not seen a video release before this point. So they didn't have to release the black and white version, and they also didn't have to clean it up, so it was amazing that they did. And Warner Archive is not known for having extras, but in addition to including the rare black and white version, they carry over the DVD commentary by Scott McQueen for the color version of Dr. X, which is one of the best commentaries I have ever been allowed to listen to. It's one of the great feature film commentaries. Scott McQueen pretty much does that on every track that he has ever done, but this one in particular I've listened to over the years many times. It is one of the great audio commentaries. But in addition, they also commissioned a new commentary by Alan K. Rode, who wrote the fantastic Michael Curtiz biography. So he did a commentary track on Mystery of the Wax Museum, also does one here on Dr. X. There's also a wonderful restoration comparison that Scott McQueen narrates, so you can see just for yourself how much work was done on this film and how it was basically resuscitated from the dead. It also includes a surviving original trailer, and it does include the featurette talking about the horror films of Michael Curtiz, primarily talking about Dr. X, Mystery of the Wax Museum, and a film that I hope the Warner Archive does, which is the 1936 Boris Karloff starring masterpiece, The Walking Dead. Those three films being the three primary horror films in Michael Curtiz's directorial career. This is a lovely stacked special edition from the Warner Archive, which makes it extra special, and it is far beyond worth what the small price tag is, because you're also getting a second feature version of the film that is also full of differences. So of course, at number one, anybody who knows me and saw my review of this disc earlier in the year would probably be able to guess what my number one for extras is, and that of course is Arrow's limited edition release of Major Dundee, a film I've been obsessed with ever since I saw it as a teenager. It's a film that once you get hooked into it, you never forget it. You constantly ponder the many what-ifs in regards to this film. Could it have been better? Would it have ever been the great roadshow epic it was originally planned to be? Was it even possible to make that film once production started? And the answer is still kind of unknown. It's a problematic film, sure, but the extras package on here really goes the extra mile in examining every available facet. This has not just the extended version Sony put together in 2005 with the new score in 5.1, but it rectifies the problem of the old Twilight Time disc by actually including the superior original mono mix of the film with the extended version, something Twilight Time did not do on their release. It also includes the theatrical cut of the film on a second disc to save bitrate space, and it is jam-packed with new extras. It includes multiple audio commentaries. It has the old Twilight Time track, and I believe that dates back to the old DVD as well, with the usual Peck and Paw experts. As a second new commentary with Alan K. Rhodey and the great critic Glenn Erickson, who has been a longtime champion of this film and probably one of the great authorities on Major Dundee alone. And then he does a solo third commentary by himself, identifying all of the cut materials and the scenes that were either never finished or never shot. And that commentary track really, I think, indicates best more of what this film could have possibly been. But that, of course, isn't all. We're still only on disc one. I have to keep the sheet handy with me because I can't remember off the top of my head how big this extras package is. It includes Moby Dick on Horseback, which is a fantastic David Caron's video essay piece. It includes a new feature-length documentary from Mike Siegel, who has done his long-running Peck and Paw Passion and Poetry documentary series on the work and life of Sam Peckinpah. So he has done an entire new feature-length documentary just on Major Dundee. So while it is some of the materials from his Passion and Poetry doc, it's full of new materials and additional things we've never seen before. So that was really rewarding. It's also got an entire little small documentary piece on Mike Siegel himself, his own life and his journey with studying and documenting Peckinpah's work. And I said short, but that's actually pretty a substantial runtime as well. And then it also includes an entire mini documentary of anecdotes about Peckinpah at Major Dundee from a lot of the actors and personnel that were interviewed in the documentary pieces. So you basically get 3 documentaries from Mike Siegel's work just about Dundee, and all of them are very extensive. Then you jump over to disc 2 with the theatrical cut, and that includes a scan of the theatrical version with the theatrical titles intact. It also includes the vintage Writing for a Fall promo piece, which is the only promotional material known to exist for Dundee. So that was beautiful to see included here on the disc release. Then it also includes some little bits of deleted and extended scenes and a few remaining silent outtakes, mostly of scenes that are not in the film and were never shown. Some of those have Glenn Erickson commentary over them, talking about their importance and where they would have been incorporated into the film. And that's fascinating to see anything that has survived. Then also it includes an entire trailer gallery of both US, UK, and German trailers for the film. Some have additional different footage, and some were contributed by Mike Siegel and from his own personal archive, so they are direct print transfer scans of the original trailer reels themselves. So to go through everything in this package, you will spend a couple days. So you can basically make it into a major Dundee week. And once you see the film and you get into its mindset, you can't stop thinking about it. So the only downside to the extras package is that it ends. I needed more. That's all I can say. So this was absolutely beautiful and easily, I think, the best extras package of the year. Now moving into the final part of this video where I try to narrow everything down and talk about the absolute top bestest of the year. I want to do one separately because I would be remiss if I didn't mention box sets, which I do as a separate category. So, unfortunately, I haven't been able to get all of the great box sets released this year. For example, Indicator released their beautiful Mae West box set right at the tail end of December, so I'm really looking forward to looking at that for myself and getting a copy because it looks fantastic. But I will say the best box set of the year 2021 otherwise does go to another Indicator title and one of their beautiful limited box set packages. So, box set of 2021, I think, has to go to their release of Columbia Noir Volume 2. With this absolutely gorgeous packaging, as they usually do, taking the limited band off. But this brings together some really underrated titles and beautiful transfers with an absolutely loaded extras package, as is typical of Indicator releases, and this just beyond gorgeous presentation of each film, given its own beautifully printed, limited slim case with this sort of digibook or digipackage design. So once again, they have just knocked it out of the park. I think they have turned the DVD and Blu-ray box set into a real work of art, and everyone has to try and keep up with Indicator. And on top of that, each of these boxes has a full-on bound book that is just massive and loaded with beautiful essays and beautiful stills. They are unparalleled in terms of their booklets and their books, and they are unparalleled in the realm of deluxe edition box sets. And these are not, even with import costs, and especially when you get some of these in their sales that they run sometimes during the year, even here in the U.S., it still doesn't break the bank to get some of these beautiful box sets. They are, you definitely get what you pay for and more than that. So I think without question, Indicator, again, takes box set of the year, no question. For 4K box set of the year, I do have to give a nod to an official studio release. This would be for Universal. This was better than I thought it would be, and the very cheap price this has gone on sale for, I think, makes it a no-brainer to purchase, even though it's not perfect. But I got this from their Groove website for literally next to nothing. So I think the 4K release of the year for catalog titles is the Universal Classic Monsters Icons of Horror collection, bringing together only 4 titles in the same manner as their Hitchcock box set. So while the packaging does leave something to be desired, since it is the book type design, it's better than most, and the slipcase has some nice embossing and some nice silveryness to it. It does, unfortunately, only include the same original 2012 Blu-rays, but the difference on one title in particular from the Blu-ray to the 4K on the Wolfman makes it look like a brand new film experience. It's a night and day difference, and worth purchasing the set alone just for the upgrade on the Wolfman, because it was the most lacking of the old Blu-rays. Unfortunately, since these films have a very tumultuous audio and restoration history, the audio on these is pretty much the same thing as what was on the Blu-rays, which is serviceable for most of the films, but not the greatest audio presentation for most of them, unfortunately. But it is pretty much the same as what's on the Blu-ray, so it's not a perfect release. It does have some issues. There are 1 or 2 spots people have found where the automated grain removal process and noise removal process accidentally removed an element in a shot of Frankenstein in particular that is problematic, but it does have so many positives that I do think it's recommendable, and especially at the sale prices this has been going for. I've seen it dip below $30, and plus if you are not into digital copies, you can give that away as a gift, and so that makes it even more affordable. So I do heartily recommend this, because It is a distinct improvement on all four titles, but The Wolfman most of all, which looks like a brand new film, as it should. The old Blu-ray was really subpar. So with all of that out of the way, I move on to my top 11 discs of 2021. These, I think, are all essential titles. They belong in any collection, and I think these are the standalone, non-box set titles that every Blu-ray collector should add to their own collections. I think these are all essential for different reasons, and I've got 11. I was trying to just have 10, but I just couldn't eliminate anything else, so I've got 11 in here, and one of them is a tie, so it's technically 12, but, you know, what are you going to do? So to just go in a rough order in terms of just adding together the overall value, the strength of the picture and audio transfer, the strength of the extras packages, and also factoring in the cost factor of how much you're getting for your money, and what I think is the overall best value and best disc of the year. So coming in at number 11, this is an essential disc that I think I've already spotlighted several times. I think this is the silent film release of the year. That is Kino's release of the new Universal restored Hunchback of Notre Dame. Coming in at number 10, this is the Warner Archive restoration of the great landmark Anthony Mann Western, The Naked Spur, with its beautiful improved transfer that makes the DVD completely obsolete. Coming in at number 9, I have Eureka's beautiful limited edition package of Karloff at Columbia, with its 6 great films, some of them outright classics, the great Mad Doctor films, the masterpiece The Black Room, and with a fantastic supplemental package including full-length audio commentaries by horror historians for all 6 films. This is a must-own. Coming in at number 8 is Indicator's release of the new 4K restoration of the classic 20th century in this beautiful new release with this gorgeous art, gorgeous picture, and phenomenal extras package. Coming in at number 7 is the tie I mentioned. These are both Warner Archive releases and both Val Lewton releases. So at a tie, I have the two 2021 releases of more of the classic Val Lewton RKO 9-film horror canon. So their release of Isle of the Dead and the double feature release of The Ghost Ship and Bedlam. We have almost the entire Lewton canon of horror films on Blu-ray now in beautiful restorations. Let's hope 2022 can finally finish us off with the missing titles I Walked with the Zombie and The Seventh Victim. Coming in at number 6 is the Criterion release of the 4K restoration of the cinematic treasure, Bringing Up Baby. This is the best the film has ever looked or sounded, pretty much ever. They found new materials to work with, resulting in a transfer that is just gorgeous. It looks better than I've ever seen the film before, and I've seen a print of the film which looks pretty much like what the Laserdisc looks like. It was actually the same source as what the Laserdisc used back in the mid to late 90s. So this advances far beyond even what you can see at an archival presentation of a print screening. The audio is better than I've ever heard it before. It's better than any of the old releases, and the extras package is quite nice and replicates most of the essential stuff from the old Warner DVD extras. Coming in at number 5, I have the Criterion 4K Blu-ray release combo pack of Citizen Kane, which has a really great extras package and a really beautiful new transfer and audio that does improve over the previous editions, but what holds it back is the really craptastic packaging, the fact it didn't have every last bit of the Laserdisc extras, and the fact that the audio is still not the best presentation of the film's audio. There are 2 versions that are still better than this release. So the audio is better than the Warner releases, but it is still not as good as it could be, and the packaging and the fact that I felt the extras package could have been a little bit better is why this is at my number 5. Coming in at number 4, even though the transfer is still the same Sony master that turned up on the previous Blu-ray releases, I think the extras package is so phenomenal and the art design and packaging of this is so good that it elevates it to my number 4 position. That is the Arrow Major Dundee release. Coming in at number 3 for the beautiful 4K restoration, the fantastic audio that's better than any previous release, and the inclusion of 2 additional features, one a documentary and the other a truly great Western, I have the Criterion release of the masterpiece High Sierra. At number 2, I have a film that is still criminally neglected. This is one of the masterpieces of the horror genre. It is one of the greatest films ever made, and the transfer here has so improved over the old releases. And they also were able to restore the long thought lost missing prologue from the film without any fanfare, and rolled over the original DVD commentary by Steve Haberman, which is a great track in and of itself. So at number 2, as second best disc of 2021, I have the Warner Archive release of Mad Love. This is a must own, and it looks and sounds absolutely stunning. You can retire the old MGM Laserdisc box set and the old DVD. They are things of the past. This is an absolute Blu-ray gold standard across the board. It is a must-own disc. And now, drumroll please, the number 1 disc of the year, the disc of the year for 2021, I think without question. It's already won several awards in this video alone, and I think it is the clear front runner. So I think anybody who doesn't have this in their list or at the top of their list is not doing their job right. That is, of course, the Warner Archive release of the restoration of the masterful Dr. X. It is absolutely astonishing. It is the perfect sister release to their previous release of Mystery of the Wax Museum, also from a restoration, which did take my Disc of the Year award along with their Curse of Frankenstein release. So it is just a beautiful disc. It is a gold standard as well. It is a must-own title. It is dirt cheap. It's been going on sale on Amazon for, between $12 and $13. Plus, it includes the rare black and white version of the film and new extras, a great new commentary, and the fantastic Scott McQueen DVD commentary rolls over as well. So it is a Warner Archive disc that is a special edition, which makes it even more special. And again, it's $13 frequently on Amazon. It is under $20. It is a reference disc. It has brought this film back from the dead and includes its alternate black and white version. So you're getting 2 feature films for the price of one, at the price of a standard studio release. It is dirt cheap and absolutely essential in every single way. It is the exact perfect match to their release of Mystery of the Wax Museum. So now you can double feature marathon these every Halloween, every single year, as you should, because they are great films. There's nothing else in the world like them. And I think this is unquestionably, for the picture restoration, for the audio restoration, for the inclusion of the black and white version, for the great, fantastic extras packages, the 2 commentaries that are so rewarding, and the extremely low price point. This is by far and away, number 1 with a bullet, the best disc of 2021. There is no comparison, and it is so well done that it rivals, if not surpasses, most 4K titles. It is absolutely astonishing and can be yours for an extremely low price point. My hat goes off to the Warner Archive, to the entire restoration team, the Film Foundation, and the UCLA Film and Television Archive. This is the best restoration of the year, best disc of the year, an incredible package. Everyone, please do yourself a favor, run out, get a copy of this. You won't regret it. It is unquestionably the disc of the year. So that was a bit long, but I did want to put together something a bit more special. I did try to spotlight a good number of titles, and again, this is not an all-encompassing list or anything. I'm just going off of the Blu-rays and 4K titles that I've been able to purchase this year and enjoy and rewatch and review and look at all the extras and things. So I do enjoy doing this type of listing and trying to break things down, and it is stuff I think about way too much. So I thought it was about time that I did something that was a bit more involved and tried to also think about different categories, and that's why I came up with the various awards and things. So I can't wait to hear what your own opinions and own favorite discs of 2021 might have been. It's always fun to have this discussion back and forth with other film fans and home media, physical media collectors, but I wanted to do something a bit more involved this year, and so that's why this video got longer and longer and longer. So as always, I hope this has been informative and helpful. I hope you check out some of these discs if you haven't already. I do highly recommend everything for different reasons that I have spotlighted in this video. Again, some of the discs I do think are unfortunately imperfect due to transfers and extras packages and things, but I think they're all highlights of 2021, and I also did mention the discs I think that should be avoided and in the worst section category, but particularly the last top discs and box sets I think are the highlights of the year, and I think are all essential titles that are worth your time, and particularly I know I highlighted a lot of Warner Archive titles, but it's really been their year yet again, and they're constantly going on sale. Various titles on Amazon for dirt cheap, so you have to watch them fluctuate because some are actually dropping to $10 and below frequently. So if you don't get a title now, it's quite possible it drops to a lower price in the next couple of weeks. So keep your eye on that. And they have a great slate coming up for 2022, as does Arrow and Indicator and Kino and Criterion and everybody else. So we are in the golden age of home video right now in terms of titles getting licensed to boutique labels. We are in a good era for cinephiles and being stuck at home, even though it's still in some form of the pandemic. So things can only look up from here, and we do have great releases in addition to the less impressive releases and the bad releases and the less decked out and fancy studio releases. But 2021 was a great year for home video, and this is just a fraction of the great titles that were released. And I wanted to spotlight my own personal favorites and explain why they were my favorites and what I thought was the best of the year. So again, thank you ever so much for watching. Let's keep supporting our boutique labels and keep physical media alive.